Hi folks, today we're going to be talking about the absolute value function, whose graph we have already run into. It was one of the ones that we memorized as a toolbox function. So this function is defined as a piecewise function. So we write like bars on either side. So we have our input inside and then we have the bars outside, which mean take the absolute value. The way that this function works, we say if x is less than 0, so if it's a negative, our output is going to be negative x. So negative and a negative is going to be positive. And if x is already greater than or equal to 0, we're just going to output x. So one way we can think about this is producing our graph. So it's made up of a couple of pieces. So our first rule here is negative x. Our slope is -1 with a y-intercept of 0. And our second rule is x, which has a slope of 1 rather. And again, a y-intercept is 0. So if we want to draw these, it can be helpful to start with graphs of y equals negative x and y equals x, and then just put them together. So we've got y equals x, slope 1 with a y-intercept of 0, and negative x, slope -1 with a y-intercept of 0, 0. Okay, and so when we go to graph these, what we're going to do is put them into a single graph. A single graph where we're going to use the first rule when x is less than 0, and we'll use the second rule when x is greater than or equal to 0. So our first rule is negative x, and then at 0, we switch to using y equals x. And so we get that V shape that we're familiar with. So a couple of things to note about this function. The domain is all real numbers. The range is 0 to infinity. And really what we're getting is that this absolute value function just strips off the sign of its input. Another way of thinking about this absolute value function is geometrically as a distance. So we can say that the absolute value of x is the distance from x to 0. Okay, so if you're sitting at 0, this you might have that x is to the right, or you might have x is to the left. But this is saying like how far away are we from 0? So it says we don't care about left or right. A common way of thinking about this is saying, in this case, if we know, for example, that the distance, if we have something like absolute value of x minus a is x, let's put in a number, x minus 3 equals 1. This is saying that x minus 3 is distance equal to 1 away from 0. Okay, and so there are two numbers that are distance 1 away from 0. There is 1, and then there's also -1. Okay, so we'd say that x minus 3 is either +1 or x minus 3 equals -1. Okay, and then we can solve for x here. So that must have been that x was equal to 4 or x was equal to 2. All right. Next up, we're going to look at how to solve equations that have absolute values.